Master Sergeant Jake Sullivan stood motionless in the pre-dawn darkness, his weathered face barely visible beneath the brim of his tactical cap. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent more than half his life in the world's most dangerous places. The jagged scar running along his left jawline, a souvenir from Fallujah, served as a permanent reminder of battles fought and brothers lost. Yet here he was, not in some distant battlefield, but 60 miles from the Mexican border, leading a classified operation that officially didn't exist. The command post, cleverly disguised as a weather monitoring station, hummed with sophisticated surveillance equipment. Banks of monitors displayed real-time feeds from drones, ground sensors, and satellite imagery. Sullivan's team of 12 operators, handpicked from Delta Force, Army Rangers, and Air Force Special Reconnaissance, moved with practiced efficiency, their movements reflecting years of specialized training. "Coffee's fresh, boss," said Sergeant First Class Maria Reyes, approaching with 2 steaming mugs. Like Sullivan, she was a veteran of multiple deployments, her expertise in signals intelligence making her invaluable to the operation. She'd followed Sullivan from Delta Force to this assignment without hesitation. "Thanks, Reyes." Sullivan accepted the mug, his eyes never leaving the monitors. "Sergeant picking up any chatter?" "Increased activity on their encrypted channels. They're definitely planning something big." Sullivan nodded, sipping the strong black coffee. Operation Eagle's Watch had been his brainchild, conceived after losing his cousin Michael to cartel violence 3 years ago. Michael hadn't been involved in drugs or crime, just a border patrol agent doing his job when a cartel hit squad ambushed his vehicle. The funeral, with its folded flag and grieving widow, had changed something in Sullivan. Born in Tucson to a military family, Jake Sullivan seemed destined for service. His grandfather had island-hopped across the Pacific in World War II, his father had earned a Silver Star in Vietnam, and Jake had enlisted straight out of high school. But unlike his ancestors, Sullivan had gravitated towards special operations, drawn by the challenge of unconventional warfare. Ranger School had been his first test, followed by Special Forces selection. But Sullivan hadn't stopped there. He'd pushed himself into Delta Force, the Army's premier counter-terrorism unit, where he'd spent 15 years hunting high-value targets across Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and a dozen countries that never made the news. His specialty was patient observation followed by precise, overwhelming action, a combination that had earned him the nickname, the Surgeon, among his peers. "Sir, we've got movement on drone feed 3, called Specialist Thompson from across the room. Sullivan moved to Thompson's station, studying the infrared image. "Scouts," he murmured. "Same pattern as 2 nights ago. They're probing our sensor grid." The cartels had grown sophisticated, employing former Mexican special forces and utilizing military-grade equipment. But Sullivan's task force represented something they hadn't encountered before, a fusion of America's most elite units operating with cutting-edge technology and almost unlimited authority within their designated sector. "Let them probe," Sullivan ordered. "I want them confident. Overconfident." His executive officer, Captain David Mitchell, approached with a tablet. "Latest intel from Langley? They've identified our friend El Fantasma. Real name, Carlos Mendoza. Former GAFE commando, suspected in over 30 murders." Sullivan studied the grainy photograph. "GAFE explains their tactical discipline. Mexican special forces aren't pushovers." "No, sir. But neither are we." Sullivan allowed himself a slight smile. His team consisted of operators who'd hunted ISIS leaders in Syria, rescued hostages in Afghanistan, and conducted operations in places so classified their own families didn't know they existed. Each brought specific expertise. Reyes with signals intelligence, Thompson with drone operations, Sergeant Kim with explosive ordnance, Chief Martinez with medical training, and others with skills ranging from sniper operations to cyber warfare. The task force occupied a unique position in the American security apparatus. Officially designated as a Border Environmental Survey Team, they operated under a top-secret special access program that reported directly to JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. Their mission: identify, monitor, and when necessary, neutralize high-level cartel operations threatening U.S. national security. "Boss, you should get some rest," Reyes suggested. "We've got 12 hours before their estimated crossing window." Sullivan shook his head. "Can't. Need to review the sensor placement along Grid 7. It was this attention to detail that had kept Sullivan alive through over 200 combat operations. He'd learned in Mogadishu that the difference between success and catastrophe often came down to tiny details: the angle of approach to a target building, the timing of air support, the placement of a single claymore mine. Moving to the planning table, Sullivan spread out topographical maps of their sector. The border here twisted through rough terrain, deep arroyos, rocky outcrops, and sparse vegetation that provided limited concealment. Most crossers avoided this area, preferring easier routes. But intelligence suggested the Mendoza cartel had spent months preparing something special here. "They chose this sector for a reason," Sullivan mused aloud. "Remote, difficult to patrol conventionally, but why here specifically?" Sergeant First Class Williams, the team's intelligence analyst, joined him at the table. "Been thinking about that, sir. Remember those geological surveys from '09? There's an old copper mine system that runs perpendicular to the border. Entrances were supposedly sealed, but perfect for tunneling operations." Sullivan finished the thought. "Get me everything on those mines. Original surveys, closure documentation, satellite imagery from the past 5 years." As Williams departed, Sullivan's encrypted phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a number he recognized: General Patricia Morrison, JSOC Commander. "Jake, how's my favorite invisible task force?" Morrison's gravelly voice carried the authority of 30 years in special operations. "Tracking a major operation, ma'am. Mendoza cartel. Estimated crossing within 24 hours. Mendoza? That's El Fantasma's outfit. Nasty bunch. Need additional assets?" Sullivan considered. "Negative, ma'am. Too many cooks. My team's got this." "Understood. Jake, this one's personal for you, isn't it? Your cousin." "Won't affect the mission, General." "I know it won't. Just remember, these bastards don't play by rules. Neither should you." After ending the call, Sullivan walked outside. Dawn painted the desert sky in shades of orange and red. The landscape looked empty, desolate. But Sullivan knew better. Beneath this apparent emptiness lay a complex web of sensors, cameras, and early warning systems that would make a NORAD installation jealous. His thoughts drifted to Michael. They'd grown up together, joined the army the same year. But while Jake had pursued special operations, Michael had chosen the Border Patrol, believing in the mission of protecting America's frontiers. His death had been brutal, tortured before being executed, his body left as a warning to other agents. "You all right, Master Sergeant?" Sullivan turned to find Sergeant Kim, the team's youngest member at 26, but already a veteran of multiple deployments. "Just thinking, Kim. You ever wonder if what we do makes a difference?" Kim considered the question. "Every time I help take down bad guys who poison our streets or threaten innocent people, I know it matters." "Your cousin, he believed that too, right?" Sullivan nodded. "He did. Thanks, Sergeant." Returning inside, Sullivan reviewed his team's positioning. Each operator brought unique capabilities. Reyes had served in the intelligence support activity, the Army's most secretive unit. Thompson had flown drones over Syria, tracking ISIS leaders. Martinez had patched up Delta operators under fire in Afghanistan. Williams had helped track Bin Laden. Together, they formed a precision instrument for a very specific type of warfare. "All right, people, listen up," Sullivan announced. The operations center fell silent. "Intel suggests we've got a major crossing planned for tonight. Mendoza Cartel, led by Carlos Mendoza, aka El Fantasma. These aren't your typical coyotes or drug mules. These are trained killers with military experience." He activated the main display, showing a tactical map of their sector. "Based on intercepts and movement patterns, we believe they'll attempt to cross here." He indicated a section of border, using a combination of tunnel systems and surface movement. Estimated force, 30 to 40 personnel, heavily armed. Specialist Rodriguez raised his hand. "ROE, sir? Rules of engagement were always crucial. Weapons free once they cross onto U.S. soil with hostile intent. Priority is gathering intelligence on their network, but if they pose an immediate threat to national security or civilian lives, we are authorized to engage with lethal force." The team absorbed this information. They'd operated under similar rules in combat zones worldwide, but doing so on American soil added weight to their responsibilities. "One more thing," Sullivan added. "Preliminary intel suggests this isn't just another drug shipment. HUMINT indicates possible weapons-grade materials. We could be looking at a potential WMD situation." The atmosphere in the room shifted. Weapons of mass destruction changed everything. "Questions? Extraction protocols if things go sideways?" asked Chief Martinez. "2 Blackhawks on 15-minute standby at Huachuca. Apache gunship support if needed. The 160th SOAR pilots know their business. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, had flown Sullivan's teams in and out of hot zones for decades. If things went bad, they'd have the best pilots in the world coming to get them." As the briefing concluded, Sullivan studied his operators. Each face showed the focused determination he'd come to expect from America's elite warriors. They trained for this, lived for this, the moment when all their skills would be tested against a real enemy threatening their homeland. Outside, the desert sun climbed higher, but shadows still clung to the arroyos and canyons where tonight's drama would unfold. The stage was set, the players assembling. Soon, the Mendoza Cartel would discover they'd chosen the wrong place to test America's resolve. And Jake Sullivan would finally get his chance to strike back at the forces that had taken his cousin's life. 3 nights before the planned crossing, Sullivan's first indication of trouble came through the sensor grid. At 0247 hours, seismic detector S14 registered movement, human footfalls, measured and deliberate. 2 individuals, moving with tactical spacing through Bronco Canyon. "Contact on grid 7, Thompson whispered into his headset, fingers dancing across his drone controls. "Launching Raven 3 for visual." Sullivan moved to Thompson's station, watching the drone's infrared feed materialize on screen. 2 heat signatures appeared against the cool desert floor, their movements too precise for ordinary migrants. These were scouts, and they were mapping the terrain. "They're checking our sensor placement," Sullivan observed. "Look at their pattern, they're walking the exact perimeter of our coverage." Reyes pulled up her signals intelligence dashboard. "Boss, I'm getting encrypted burst transmissions. Low power, frequency hopping. Professional setup. Can you crack it?" "Working on it. This isn't standard narco-comm gear. Military-grade encryption." Sullivan felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same sensation he'd experienced before high-risk operations in Afghanistan. The cartels were evolving, and this operation bore the hallmarks of something more sophisticated than a typical drug run. "Sir," Williams called from his intelligence station. "Just got flash traffic from DA Tucson. They intercepted a call mentioning El Fantasma and a major shipment. Timeline matches our intel. Details? Fragmentary, But they mentioned special cargo requiring NBC protocols. Nuclear, biological, chemical. Sullivan's jaw tightened. Get Northcom on secure line. If we're dealing with WMD materials, I want CBRN teams on standby. As the night wore on, Sullivan's team tracked the scouts' methodical reconnaissance. By dawn, they had mapped every camera, sensor, and observation post in the sector. More concerning, they'd identified gaps in coverage, areas where the rugged terrain created natural blind spots. They're good, Thompson admitted as the scouts melted back across the border. Really good. Not good enough, Sullivan replied. Reyes, any luck with those transmissions? Partial decrypt. They're using a rolling cipher, but I caught fragments. They mentioned 3 teams and Tunnel Charlie. Sullivan pulled up the geological surveys Williams had located. 3 abandoned mine shafts intersected the border at different points. Tunnel Charlie would be the 3rd shaft. Here. He tapped the map. Martinez, take Rodriguez and check it out. Full CBRN gear. 2 hours later, Martinez reported back. Shaft's been reopened, sir. Fresh excavation, professional shoring. This isn't some hand-dug narco tunnel. We're looking at major engineering. That afternoon, Sullivan convened his leadership team. The situation was escalating beyond a simple interdiction operation. Based on current intelligence, he began. We're facing a multi-pronged crossing attempt. The Mendoza Cartel has spent months preparing this operation. They've mapped our defenses, established at least one major tunnel, and they're bringing something that requires hazmat protocols. Captain Mitchell studied the tactical display. 3 teams suggest a diversion strategy. Hit us at multiple points, stretch our resources. Agreed. But which team carries the primary payload? The tunnel, Reyes suggested. Surface crossings are for show. The real cargo goes underground. Sullivan nodded. That's my assessment too. But we can't ignore the surface teams. They'll be heavily armed, probably tasked with drawing our attention. Kim raised a point that had been bothering Sullivan. Sir, how did they map our sensor grid so accurately? That level of detail suggests inside information. Sullivan finished grimly. Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. Someone's feeding them intelligence. The possibility of a leak added another layer of complexity. Sullivan had operated in environments where trust was a luxury, where allies could become enemies with a single phone call. He looked at his team, men and women he trusted with his life countless times. The thought that one of them might be compromised was almost unbearable. We proceed as planned, he decided. But we implement strict compartmentalization. Need tunnel basis for all operational details. That evening, Sullivan received an unexpected visitor. Border Patrol Agent Sarah Chin approached the command post, her patrol vehicle kicking up dust in the fading light. Master Sergeant Sullivan? She called out as he met her at the perimeter. I'm Agent Chin. I think we need to talk. Sullivan assessed her quickly, mid-30s, alert eyes, confident bearing. Her uniform was dusty but maintained, her sidearm worn from use rather than neglect. About why the Mendoza Cartel suddenly stopped using our sector 6 months ago, then started probing it again last week. About why my supervisors keep rearranging patrol schedules at the last minute. And about why I found surveyor stakes in Bronco Canyon that weren't there last month. Sullivan made a decision. Come inside. In the command post, Chin proved her worth immediately. She'd been patrolling this sector for 8 years, knew every trail, every hiding spot. More importantly, she'd noticed patterns that corroborated Sullivan's intelligence. The tunnel in Shaft 3 isn't their only one, she revealed, pointing to the map. I've documented ground subsidence here and here. Classic signs of underground excavation. Why haven't you reported this? Chen's expression hardened. I have. Multiple times. Reports keep getting lost or misfiled. Last week, my sector chief suggested I might be overworked and needed a transfer. You think corruption reaches that high? Master Sergeant, I know it does. The Mendoza cartel doesn't just bribe, they infiltrate. They have people inside Border Patrol, local law enforcement, maybe even higher. Sullivan processed this information. It explained the detailed knowledge of their sensor grid, the precisely timed probes. Agent Chin, I'm going to bring you into something classified. But first I need to know, why come to us? Why risk your career? Chen's eyes flashed with anger. Because 3 months ago, they killed my partner. Tommy Vasquez. Good man, honest cop. He was getting too close to something, and they made him disappear. Officially, he deserted his post. I know better. Sullivan recognized the pain in her voice, the same pain he carried for his cousin. All right, Agent Chin. You're in. But understand, what you're about to learn doesn't exist officially. Over the next hour, Sullivan briefed Chin on Operation Eagle's Watch. Her local knowledge proved invaluable, filling gaps in their intelligence picture. The crossing attempt, she said, studying their tactical display. It's not just about moving product. The Mendoza cartel is establishing a permanent corridor. Those tunnels? They're infrastructure for long-term operations. Which explains the sophisticated approach. Mitchell added. This is an investment, not a one-off run. Sullivan's encrypted phone buzzed. Unknown number, but the authentication codes checked out. Condor 6. He answered. Condor 6, this is Watchdog. An electronically distorted voice replied. Consider this a professional courtesy. Your operation has been compromised. Expect contact within 72 hours. Trust no one above your pay grade. The line went dead. Sullivan stared at the phone, mind racing. Watchdog was a code name he hadn't heard in years, used by a CIA asset he'd worked with in Syria. If the message was authentic. Problem, boss? Reyes asked. Maybe. We're accelerating our timeline. Whatever the cartel's planning, it happens soon. Maybe tonight. The team snapped into action. Drone coverage expanded, sensors recalibrated for maximum sensitivity. Sullivan deployed 2-man reconnaissance teams to cover the newly identified tunnel sites. As darkness fell, the desert came alive with hidden activity. Thermal imaging showed heat blooms along the Mexican side of the border, vehicles arriving, personnel assembling. Radio intercepts increased exponentially. They're mobilizing, Williams reported. Multiple convoy formations. Estimated 50-plus personnel. More than we expected, Mitchell observed. Chin was right. This isn't just a crossing, it's an invasion. At 2,200 hours, Sergeant Rodriguez radioed from his observation post near Tunnel Site 2. Condor 6, we have activity. Multiple vehicles approaching the mine entrance on the Mexican side. Count 12. No, 15 personnel. Armed, tactical gear. ROE status? Sullivan asked. They're still on Mexican soil, sir. But they're unloading something. Heavy cases, handling them like they're fragile. Sullivan switched channels. All stations, we have activity at Site 2. Maintain positions, observe and report. Do not engage unless fired upon. The situation developed rapidly. Reyes intercepted a transmission that made her face pale. Sir, I just caught a reference to dirty payload. If they're moving radioactive material, get Nest on standby, Sullivan ordered. The nuclear emergency support team could deploy from Kirtland Air Force Base within hours. An alert Northcom. This just became a national security incident. Chin approached Sullivan quietly. There's something else. That sector chief who wanted me transferred? He's scheduled to lead tonight's border patrol shift. Convenient timing. You think he'll create gaps in coverage? I think he already has. Look. She showed him the night's patrol routes. These patterns leave Corridor 3 completely exposed for a 2-hour window starting at midnight. Sullivan felt the pieces clicking into place. The cartel's plan was brilliant in its complexity, multiple crossing points, inside assistance, and cargo important enough to justify months of preparation. But they'd made one critical error. They'd underestimated the capabilities of America's Special Operations Forces. All right, people, listen up, Sullivan announced to his team. We're looking at a coordinated incursion across 3 vectors. Based on latest intel, we have possible WMD materials in play. The cartel has inside support from compromised law enforcement elements. He activated the main display, showing real-time positions of cartel forces. We're outnumbered roughly 3-1. They have the element of surprise, or think they do. But we have superior training, technology, and the home field advantage. Sullivan outlined his plan. It was risky, requiring his small team to cover multiple objectives simultaneously. But if executed properly, they could turn the cartel's elaborate strategy against them. Questions? Sir, Kim spoke up. If this is as big as it looks, shouldn't we call in reinforcements? Rangers from Fort Huachuca, additional assets? Sullivan had considered this. Negative. Too many variables, too many chances for leaks. We keep this tight. Besides, he smiled grimly. 12 of us against 50 of them? I almost feel sorry for the cartel. Nervous laughter rippled through the team. They'd faced worse odds in Afghanistan, Iraq, and a dozen other battlefields. But this was different. This was home soil. As midnight approached, Sullivan positioned his forces. 2-man teams covered each identified crossing point. Drones maintained overwatch. Reyes coordinated electronic warfare assets, ready to jam cartel communications at the critical moment. From his command position, Sullivan watched the operation unfold. The cartel moved with impressive coordination, their 3 teams advancing toward the border simultaneously. But Sullivan had anticipated their every move. All stations, weapons tight until they cross, he reminded his teams. We need them on U.S. soil for legal authority. Chen, you're our official witness. Make sure your body cam is running. Roger that. At 0015 hours, the first cartel element breached the border. 10 men, heavily armed, moving through Corridor 3 exactly as Chen had predicted. They thought they were entering an unmonitored sector. Instead, they walked directly into Sullivan's kill zone. Team 1 is across, reported Sergeant Davis from his concealed position. They're setting up security for follow-on forces. Let them, Sullivan ordered. We wait for the main element. The tunnel teams reported increased activity. Through fiber-optic cameras, they observed cartel members preparing to move their mysterious cargo through the underground passages. At 0030, Sullivan received the message he'd been waiting for. Condor 6, this is Rodriguez. We have visual on El Fantasma. He's personally supervising the tunnel operation. Carlos Mendoza himself. The ghost who had haunted the border for years, responsible for countless deaths including Michael Sullivan and Tommy Vasquez. Tonight he'd stepped out of the shadows. All stations, prepared to execute. On my mark. But before Sullivan could give the order, Agent Chen's voice crackled over the radio, tight with urgency. Sullivan! We've got a problem. 3 black SUVs approaching fast from the north. Government plates. It's my sector chief and what looks like federal agents, but something's wrong. Sullivan's blood ran cold. The corruption ran deeper than they'd imagined. Either legitimate federal agents had been duped into disrupting the operation, or worse, the cartel had personnel masquerading as feds. Either way, Sullivan's carefully orchestrated trap was about to collapse. He had second DS to decide: engage the cartel now and risk a Blunbla incident with possible federal agents, or hold position and potentially let the largest WMD smuggling attempt in U.S. history succeed. Sullivan had 3 seconds to make a decision that would determine the fate of the operation, and possibly thousands of American lives. The approaching SUVs with government plates could be legitimate federal agents responding to intelligence leaks, or they could be cartel associates with false credentials. Either scenario spelled disaster. All teams hold position, Sullivan ordered, his mind racing through tactical options. Reyes, can you verify those vehicles? Working on it. Negative, sir. No federal operation scheduled for this sector tonight. Watchdog's warning, Mitchell murmured. Trust no one above your pay grade. The black SUV skidded to a stop near the command post perimeter. Armed men in tactical gear emerged, wearing jackets marked Federal Agent. Agent Chen's voice came through Sullivan's earpiece. That's my sector chief, Rodriguez. The others? I don't recognize them. Sullivan switched to a private channel with Chen. Your assessment? Something's off. Rodriguez never runs field ops. And those agents, their gear's too new, no wear patterns. The sector chief approached the command post entrance. Federal agents. We need access to this facility immediately. Sullivan stepped outside, keeping his hand near his sidearm. This is a restricted military installation. I'll need to see identification and verify your authority. Rodriguez produced a badge. Homeland Security. We have intelligence of terrorist activity in this sector. Stand down your operation immediately. I'll need to confirm that through my chain of command. There's no time. Rodriguez snapped. Every second you delay puts American lives at risk. Sullivan noticed one of the agents speaking quietly into a radio, not standard federal communications gear, but a commercial model. The same type his team had intercepted cartel members using. Mitchell. Sullivan subvocalized into his throat mic. Status on the crossing? All 3 cartel teams are in motion. El Fantasma's team is entering the tunnel with the cargo. Sullivan made his decision. Agent Rodriguez, I'm going to need you and your team to wait here while I verify your credentials. Rodriguez's face darkened. You're interfering with a federal operation. I can have you arrested. That's your prerogative, sir. But until my authentication comes through, no one enters this facility. The tension escalated as Rodriguez reached for his radio. At that moment, Reyes' voice crackled in Sullivan's ear. Boss. These guys are using the same encryption as the cartel scouts. They're coordinating with the crossing teams. Sullivan's hand moved to his weapon. Rodriguez, I'm going to need you and your men to step back and keep your hands visible. The fake federal agents realized their cover was blown. Rodriguez drew his weapon, but Sullivan was faster. 2 shots center mass, and the corrupt sector chief crumpled. His companions opened fire, but Sullivan's team was ready. The firefight lasted 20 seconds. When it ended, 5 fake agents lay dead or wounded. But the gunfire had alerted the cartel teams. Contact! Contact! Came Rodriguez's voice from tunnel observation point 2. Cartel forces are accelerating their timeline. El Fantasma's moving the cargo now. Sullivan sprinted back into the command post. The tactical display showed chaos. All 3 cartel teams had abandoned their careful approach and were rushing toward the border. Execute. Execute. All teams engage. Sullivan ordered. Across the sector, his operators sprang into action. At crossing point Alpha, Davis and Thompson caught the first cartel team in a devastating crossfire. At Bravo, Kim and Martinez used prepositioned claymore mines to stop the second team cold. But at Charlie, the tunnel entrance, things were going wrong. Condor 6, we're taking heavy fire, Rodriguez reported. They've got RPGs, heavy machine guns. We're pinned down! Sullivan grabbed his rifle and headed for the door. Mitchell, you have command. I'm going to Charlie. Sir, that's El Fantasma is there. This ends tonight. Sullivan commandeered one of the dead agent's SUVs and raced toward the tunnel's site. As he drove, reports flooded in. The surface teams were being contained, but El Fantasma's tunnel force was fighting with desperate intensity. Arriving at Charlie, Sullivan found Rodriguez and his partner pinned behind rocky cover, taking fire from a dozen cartel soldiers. The tunnel entrance was 50 yards away, heavily defended. Sullivan belly-crawled to Rodriguez's position. Sitrep! They've got overlapping fields of fire. Every time we move, they put 100 rounds downrange. And sir, they're bringing something out of the tunnel. Lead-lined cases. Through his night vision, Sullivan could see cartel members carefully handling several metal containers. If those contained radioactive material. We need air support, Rodriguez said. Negative. Too much risk of dispersing whatever's in those cases. Sullivan keyed his radio. Reyes, what's our ETA on Nest? 20 minutes out. Too long. Sullivan had to act now. He studied the tactical situation, his mind processing angles, distances, cover positions. Then he saw it, a narrow ravine that curved behind the cartel's position. Exposed, dangerous, but it offered a flanking opportunity. Rodriguez, in 30 seconds, I want you to lay down suppressing fire. Everything you've got. What are you doing? Something stupid. Sullivan sprinted for the ravine as Rodriguez opened fire. Bullets cracked overhead, impacting rocks inches from his position. He dove, rolled, came up running. His lungs burned as he navigated the treacherous terrain. Memories flooded back, a similar maneuver in Tora Bora, hunting Bin Laden. His team leader had called it Vintage Sullivan, praising his ability to find impossible angles of attack. But that was half a lifetime ago, in mountains half a world away. The ravine ended 30 yards from the tunnel entrance. Sullivan could see El Fantasma directing the cargo loading, a tall man with silver-streaked hair, moving with military precision. The ghost himself. Sullivan raised his rifle, but hesitated. The cargo containers were too close. A stray round could breach containment, releasing whatever horror they contained. Then he noticed something, a pattern in the cartel's defensive positions. They were protecting the cargo, yes, but also maintaining a specific formation. Almost like they're waiting for someone, Sullivan realized. Someone important. As if on cue, another convoy of vehicles appeared on the Mexican side of the border. A helicopter's rotors beat the air in the distance. Condor 6, we've got a problem, Reyes reported. Massive heat signatures approaching from the south. Looks like cartel reinforcements, at least 50 more fighters. The situation was spiraling. Sullivan needed to act before an explosion rocked the desert floor. Rodriguez had gotten creative, using his last grenade to collapse part of the tunnel entrance. The blast sent cartel fighters scrambling, and in the confusion, Sullivan saw his opportunity. He charged from the ravine, rifle firing controlled bursts. 3 cartel soldiers fell before they realized the threat. Sullivan kept moving, using their bodies as cover, advancing on the cargo containers. El Fantasma turned, saw Sullivan, and smiled. Ah, the famous Condor 6. We've been expecting you. Step away from the containers, Mendoza. You know my name. I'm flattered. El Fantasma gestured to the metal cases. Do you know what these contain? The power to reshape the world. Dirty bombs, yes, but so much more. Biological agents. Chemical weapons. Everything needed to bring America to its knees. You're insane. Am I? Your country created these weapons. We're simply returning them. More cartel fighters converged on their position. Sullivan was surrounded, outgunned. But he'd been here before, In Fallujah, when his team was ambushed in a 4-story building. In Somalia, when a simple reconnaissance mission turned into a running gunfight through Mogadishu's streets. "Drop your weapons!" Sullivan commanded. "This is your only warning." El Fantasma laughed. "You Americans! Always so confident, even when defeated. Kill him." What happened next would be debated in after-action reports for years. Some said Sullivan moved with superhuman speed. Others claimed divine intervention. The truth was simpler, 15 years of muscle memory taking over. Sullivan dropped to one knee as the cartel opened fire. His rifle barked methodically, controlled pairs center mass, just as he'd been trained at Fort Bragg decades ago. 6 men fell in as many seconds. But there were too many. A round caught Sullivan's plate carrier, knocking him backward. Another grazed his shoulder. He rolled behind a cargo container as automatic fire chewed up the ground where he'd been standing. "Give up, Condor!" El Fantasma called. "You're alone, wounded. Your team is scattered. Accept your fate with dignity." Sullivan checked his ammunition, 1 magazine left. His shoulder burned, blood seeping through his sleeve. Lightning flickered on the horizon, and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of approaching rain. A sandstorm. The weather reports had mentioned the possibility, but the timing. Sullivan smiled grimly. In Iraq, his unit had used sandstorms for cover, turning nature's fury into tactical advantage. If he could hold out a few more minutes. He keyed his radio. "All stations, sandstorm inbound. Prepare for low-visibility operations." The first gusts hit as Sullivan made his move. Sand and dust swirled, cutting visibility to mere yards. The cartel fighters cursed, momentarily blinded. Sullivan burst from cover, weaving between confused enemies. His knife found 2 throats before anyone realized he'd moved. A third man raised his weapon, too late. Sullivan's elbow crushed his windpipe. Through the swirling sand, he saw El Fantasma attempting to load the containers into an armored vehicle. Sullivan raised his rifle, but a massive cartel soldier, easily 6 foot 5 and 300 pounds, stepped into his path. "You want El Fantasma?" the giant growled. "Go through me." The big man charged. Sullivan sidestepped, using the giant's momentum against him. They crashed into the side of a vehicle, grappling for control. The cartel soldier was strong, incredibly strong, but Sullivan had technique. A hip throw sent the giant sprawling. But he recovered quickly, drawing a combat knife. The 2 men circled each other as the sandstorm intensified. "You're good, gringo," the giant admitted. "But I was Fuerzas Especials. Mexican Special Forces. I've killed better men than you." "Maybe," Sullivan replied. "But they weren't protecting their home." They clashed again. The giant's knife sliced Sullivan's forearm, but Sullivan trapped the weapon hand, hyperextending the elbow until it snapped. The giant howled, dropping the knife. Sullivan didn't hesitate. A palm strike to the solar plexus, followed by an elbow to the jaw. The giant staggered. Sullivan swept his legs, driving him to the ground, then applied a rear naked choke. The massive man struggled, then went limp. But the fight had cost precious time. Through the sandstorm, Sullivan saw El Fantasma's vehicle pulling away with the containers. He sprinted after it, knowing he'd never catch up on foot. Then Salvation appeared, one of the cartel's own trucks, keys still in the ignition. Sullivan jumped in, gunned the engine, and gave chase. The pursuit through the sandstorm was nightmarish. Visibility near zero, terrain treacherous, both vehicles pushing their limits. Sullivan's truck bounced over rocks, nearly rolled in a deep wash, but he kept the accelerator floored. Ahead, El Fantasma's armored vehicle swerved to avoid an outcropping. Sullivan saw his chance. He pulled alongside, then deliberately rammed the other vehicle. Metal screamed against metal. both trucks spun out of control. Sullivan's vehicle flipped, rolling twice before coming to rest on its side. Dazed, bleeding, he crawled out through the shattered windshield. 20 yards away, El Fantasma's vehicle had fared no better. It lay on its roof, wheels still spinning. Sullivan staggered toward it, his pistol drawn. El Fantasma crawled from the wreckage, clutching a briefcase, likely containing detonation codes for the weapons. He saw Sullivan approaching and laughed bitterly. "Persistent, aren't you?" Blood ran down the cartel leader's face. "Like a force of nature. Drop the case, Mendoza. It's over." "Over?" El Fantasma stood unsteadily. "This is just beginning. Even if you stop me, others will come. The cartels, the terrorists, the enemies you've made, they'll never stop coming for America." "Maybe not," Sullivan admitted. "But we'll never stop defending it." El Fantasma raised a pistol. Sullivan was faster. 3 shots to center mass, and the ghost of the border finally fell. As the sandstorm began to abate, Sullivan secured the briefcase and checked on the cargo containers. Intact, thank God. He activated his emergency beacon, knowing his team would home in on the signal. Within minutes, the distinctive thump of helicopter rotors filled the air. Not one, but 3 Black Hawks, escorted by Apache gunships. The cavalry had arrived. As the helicopters landed, disgorging nest specialists and additional special operators, Sullivan allowed himself to sit on an overturned container. His body screamed in protest, the shoulder wound, various cuts and bruises, possible cracked ribs from the vehicle rollover. "Medic!" someone shouted, and suddenly Doc Martinez was kneeling beside him. "Jesus, boss, you look like you went 10 rounds with a grizzly. Just patch me up, document. We've still got work to do." As Martinez tended his wounds, reports filtered in. The surface crossing teams had been neutralized. The corrupt officials were either dead or in custody. Most importantly, all WMD materials had been secured. Agent Chen approached, her uniform dusty but her eyes bright. The weapons specialist confirmed it: dirty bomb components, weaponized anthrax, sarin precursors. If this stuff had made it into the country. But it didn't. Sullivan interrupted. He wasn't interested in hypotheticals. The mission had succeeded. That's what mattered. General Morrison arrived on the last helicopter. She surveyed the battlefield, then walked over to Sullivan. "Outstanding work, Jake. You've prevented a catastrophe. Team effort, ma'am. Don't be modest. I've already got JSOC preparing your medal recommendation. This kind of action, on American soil, it's unprecedented." Sullivan looked around at his team, all accounted for, all alive despite the odds. He thought about his cousin Michael, about Agent Chen's partner Tommy Vasquez, about all the good people who'd died fighting the cartels. "With respect, General, I don't want a medal. I want resources. Better equipment, more personnel, expanded authority. The cartels aren't going away. Neither should we." Morrison smiled. "Already in the works. After tonight, you'll have a blank check? Congress is funny that way, nothing motivates them like a prevented nuclear incident." As the first rays of dawn broke over the desert, Sullivan watched nest teams carefully loading the WMD materials for transport to secure facilities. The battle was won, but he knew the war continued. Somewhere out there, other cartels were planning, other threats were emerging. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, America was safe. And Jake Sullivan had finally found a measure of peace for his cousin's memory. "Your cousin would be proud," Chen said quietly, standing beside him. "Maybe. But he'd probably give me hell for taking unnecessary risks. That's what family does." Sullivan smiled, despite the pain. "Yeah. That's what family does." As the cleanup operation continued around them, Sullivan's radio crackled to life. "Condor 6, this is Overwatch. We've got unusual activity on the Mexican side. Military vehicles, but not Mexican army. Stand by for imagery. Sullivan sighed and reached for his rifle. The mission, it seemed, wasn't quite over. The satellite imagery appeared on Sullivan's tactical display, revealing a formation of military vehicles approaching the border, but something was wrong. These weren't Mexican army units. The vehicle configurations, the tactical spacing, even the way they moved screamed special operations. Reyes, run those vehicle signatures through our database, Sullivan ordered, despite his exhaustion and wounds. Already on it, sir. Boss, you're not going to like this. Those match Russian Spetsnaz configurations. Specifically SVR tactical units. Russian Foreign Intelligence Services. Operating on the Mexican side of the border. Sullivan felt his blood run cold. That's impossible, General Morrison said. The Russians wouldn't dare, they already have. Sullivan interrupted. Think about it. El Fantasma had military-grade encryption, professional tunneling equipment, access to WMDs. The cartels don't have that capability alone. Agent Chen studied the imagery. El Fantasma kept checking his watch during the confrontation. Like he was expecting someone. Extraction team. Mitchell added. The Russians were coming to secure their assets. Sullivan connected the dots rapidly. The sophisticated nature of the operation, the corrupt federal officials with perfect credentials, the precisely detailed intelligence about their sensor grid. This wasn't just a cartel operation, it was a state-sponsored act of aggression using the cartels as proxy forces. All units prepare for potential contact, Sullivan ordered. ROE is weapons tight unless directly engaged. These aren't narcos anymore, this is a potential international incident. Through his high-powered optics, Sullivan watched the Russian convoy halt at the border. 6 vehicles, approximately 30 personnel. They deployed with the precision of elite operators, establishing a perimeter while their commander, identifiable by his bearing and the deference shown by others, approached the border fence. The commander spoke in accented English, his voice carrying across the desert. American forces, this is Colonel Volkov, Russian Federation. We are conducting a humanitarian recovery operation for Russian nationals killed in criminal violence. We request permission to retrieve our dead. Morrison grabbed Sullivan's radio. Colonel Volkov, this is General Morrison, U.S. Special Operations Command. There are no Russian nationals at this location. Withdraw immediately. General, with respect, we have intelligence indicating several of our citizens were killed in tonight's unfortunate incident. We simply wish to recover their remains. Sullivan knew this game. During his time in Syria, he'd encountered similar tactics, Russians using humanitarian pretexts to recover intelligence or compromised assets. But 2 could play at that. Sir, Sullivan said to Morrison, let me handle this. He keyed the radio. Colonel Volkov, Master Sergeant Sullivan here. I'm the ground force commander. I'd be happy to assist with your humanitarian mission. Why don't you provide me with the names of your missing nationals? I'll personally check our casualty lists. There was a pause. Volkov was calculating, weighing his options. Our citizens were private security contractors. Their names may not appear on official documentation. I see. And these contractors just happen to be working with a Mexican cartel attempting to smuggle WMDs into the United States? We know nothing of such activities. These were legitimate businessmen. Sullivan smiled grimly. Colonel, I have a better idea. Why don't you tell Moscow that their operation failed? El Fantasma is dead. The weapons are secured. And if Russian forces cross this border, they'll face the full might of the U.S. military. The tension crackled like electricity. Through his scope, Sullivan could see Volkov conferring with his subordinates. The Russians were well armed, professional, and dangerous. But they were also exposed, operating far from support in hostile territory. "You're making a mistake, Sergeant," Volkov finally responded. "There are larger forces at work here than you comprehend." "Maybe. But right now, I comprehend this. You're on the wrong side of the border with the wrong intentions. Last chance, withdraw." For a moment, Sullivan thought Volkov might actually order an attack. The Russian colonel's hand moved near his weapon. Sullivan's finger tensed on his trigger. Around him, his team prepared for what could spark World War III. Then, unexpectedly, Volkov laughed. "You have steel in your spine, Sergeant. Very well. We withdraw, for now. But this game is far from over." The Russian convoy began pulling back. But as they turned to leave, one of their vehicles launched something, a small drone that zipped across the border before anyone could react. "Drone! Take it down!" Sullivan ordered. Kim fired, clipping the drone's wing, but it managed to complete its mission, a rapid scan of the battlefield, before crashing. The Russians had just gathered detailed intelligence on American defensive positions and capabilities. As the Russian vehicles disappeared into the desert, General Morrison turned to Sullivan. "Sergeant, what you just witnessed stays classified at the highest levels. This incident never happened." "Understood, ma'am. But if the Russians are involved..." "I know. This changes everything. I need to brief the Joint Chiefs immediately." As Morrison departed in her command helicopter, Sullivan gathered his team. They were exhausted, battered, but alert. The revelation of Russian involvement had injected new energy into tired bodies. "All right, people, listen up," Sullivan began. "What happened tonight goes way beyond cartels and drug smuggling. We've stumbled into something bigger." Chen stepped forward. "The corruption in my agency." "You think the Russians orchestrated that too?" "Almost certainly. This has been years in the making. Infiltration, subversion, preparing the battlefield." Martinez, still working on Sullivan's wounds, spoke up. "So what now, boss? If the Russians are running ops through the cartels, now we adapt." Eagle's Watch just became a counterintelligence operation. Over the next several hours, as hazmat teams secured the WMD materials and forensic specialists processed the battlefield, Sullivan's team uncovered more pieces of the puzzle. El Fantasma's satellite phone contained encrypted communications with Moscow. The tunnel construction showed techniques used in Russian military engineering. Even some of the weapons bore Cyrillic markings, hastily filed off but still visible under UV light. Rodriguez found something even more disturbing in the wreckage of El Fantasma's vehicle, a detailed target package for major U.S. cities. Water supplies, power grids, communications hubs. The dirty bombs had been just the beginning. They were planning a campaign, Sullivan realized. Systematic destabilization using cartel networks as cover. Agent Chen had been working with the captured corrupt officials. "Sir, you need to hear this." One of them is talking. The prisoner, a mid-level Homeland Security official named Davidson, sat in makeshift detention, clearly terrified. "They said it was just about money," Davidson stammered. "Moving drugs, looking the other way. I didn't know about any of this." "Who recruited you?" Sullivan demanded. "A man named Petrov. Said he was a businessman, but I think he was FSB. He had information, things he couldn't possibly know unless Russian intelligence had penetrated our systems," Sullivan finished. Davidson nodded miserably. "There are others. Dozens of us. In Border Patrol, DA, even FBI. They'd been building this network for years." Sullivan felt the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. This wasn't just about one night's victory. They'd exposed the tip of a vast intelligence operation. His secure phone buzzed. "General Morrison." "Jake, I briefed the president. He wants to speak with you directly." Moments later, Sullivan found himself on an encrypted line with the Commander-in-Chief. Sergeant Sullivan, I've been briefed on your actions tonight. Outstanding work. Thank you, Mr. President. General Morrison tells me you've uncovered evidence of a major Russian intelligence operation. I need to know, in your professional opinion, how deep does this go? Sullivan considered carefully. Sir, based on what we're seeing, this is a long-term strategic effort to use criminal networks as proxy forces against the United States. The cartels provide plausible deniability while the Russians achieve strategic objectives. And tonight's operation? Was meant to be a proof of concept, sir. Demonstrate the capability to strike inside our borders using deniable assets. If those WMDs had been deployed. I understand. Sergeant, I'm authorizing expansion of Eagle's Watch. Unlimited resources, direct presidential authority. Your mission is to root out this network and protect our homeland. Are you up for it? Sullivan looked at his team, battered, exhausted, but ready. He thought about his cousin Michael, about all the Americans at risk from this shadowy threat. Yes, Mr. President. We won't let you down. After the call ended, Sullivan turned to his team. Looks like we're in for the long haul. About time, Mitchell said. I was getting bored with retirement anyway. As dawn broke fully over the desert, Sullivan reflected on how the night had transformed their mission. What began as a counter-narcotics operation had revealed a new Cold War being fought in the shadows. The cartels were just puppets. The real enemy wore different uniforms and answered to different masters. But some things remained constant. The dedication of American warriors. The willingness to stand between darkness and light. The quiet professionals who manned freedom's ramparts. Walking among his team, checking on wounded, coordinating with arriving reinforcements, Sullivan felt a renewed sense of purpose. They'd stopped one attack, saved countless lives. But the war, this new, shadowy conflict, was just beginning. In the distance, a single hawk wheeled against the morning sky. Sullivan watched it circle, riding the thermals above the battlefield. Like that hawk, he and his team would maintain their vigil, watching, waiting, ready to strike when freedom was threatened. The revelation of the night had changed everything. But it had also clarified their mission. Evil had shown its face, thinking America weak and divided. Tonight had proven otherwise. As Agent Chin approached with fresh intelligence reports, Sullivan straightened his shoulders despite the pain. There was work to do. Enemies to hunt. A nation to protect. The ghost of El Fantasma might be dead, but other phantoms lurked in the shadows. Sullivan and his team would be ready for them. Because that's what Guardians do. They stand watch. They hold the line. They never quit. And in the harsh light of the desert dawn, with the evidence of their victory scattered across the battlefield, one truth emerged crystal clear: America's enemies had badly miscalculated. They'd awakened something fierce and implacable, the spirit of warriors who would never yield, never surrender, never stop defending their homeland. The game, as Colonel Volkov had said, was indeed far from over. But Sullivan knew something the Russian didn't. In this game, on this ground, with these stakes, American resolve would always prevail. The hawk circled one more time, then stooped, diving toward unseen prey. Sullivan smiled grimly and checked his weapon. Time to hunt. The aftermath of the battle transformed the desert landscape into a hive of activity. Federal agencies descended like locusts: FBI, CIA, DHS, each claiming jurisdiction, each wanting a piece of the intelligence goldmine Sullivan's team had uncovered. But with presidential authority now backing Eagle's Watch, Sullivan maintained operational control. Sir, we've got 17 agencies requesting access to the prisoners, Reyes reported, frustration evident in her voice. Tell them to get in line, Sullivan replied. Our interrogators get first crack. This is still our operation. The command post had expanded threefold in 12 hours. Secure communications equipment, analytical workstations, and a dedicated fusion cell transformed the modest facility into a major intelligence hub. Sullivan's team of 12 had grown to include specialists from across the special operations community. Agent Chen proved invaluable, her knowledge of Border Patrol's inner workings helping identify compromised officials. Within 48 hours, they'd arrested 23 corrupt agents, each revealing more tentacles of Russian infiltration. The scope is staggering, Chen told Sullivan during a briefing. They didn't just bribe people, they cultivated assets over years. Some of these guys thought they were just taking cartel money, never realizing they were working for Moscow. Sullivan nodded grimly. Classic intelligence tradecraft. Multiple layers of cuts, plausible deniability. But we're rolling it up. The intelligence yield was extraordinary. El Fantasma's encrypted communications, once cracked, revealed a network spanning from Moscow to Mexico City to Miami. Shell companies, front organizations, corrupted officials, all pieces of a vast chess game. 3 days after the battle, Sullivan received unexpected visitors. A convoy of black SUVs, legitimate ones this time, arrived carrying the directors of CIA, FBI, and NSA. Sergeant Sullivan, CIA Director Hamilton began. What you've uncovered has implications far beyond border security. We're looking at the most significant Russian intelligence operation since the Cold War. With respect, sir, looking at it isn't enough. We need to dismantle it. FBI Director Martinez nodded. Agreed. Which is why we're here. The President has authorized a joint task force. You'll lead the tactical element. Sullivan glanced at his team. They'd been running on adrenaline and coffee for 72 hours, but their eyes showed determination, not exhaustion. What are our rules of engagement? Whatever's necessary, NSA Director Parks said quietly. The gloves are off. Over the following weeks, Eagle's Watch evolved from a border security operation into America's tip of the spear against Russian hybrid warfare. Sullivan's team, reinforced with additional operators, launched raids across the Southwest. Each operation revealed more of the enemy's plan. In Tucson, they shut down a money laundering operation funneling millions to corrupt officials. In El Paso, they intercepted another weapons shipment, conventional arms this time, but enough to equip a small army. In San Diego, they broke up a cell planning cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. But the transformation went deeper than operational tempo. Sullivan himself changed, evolving from a tactical leader into a strategic thinker. Long nights studying intelligence reports, understanding the connections between criminal networks and state actors, recognizing patterns that others missed. You're becoming quite the spy master, General Morrison observed during a visit. Just adapting to the threat, ma'am. No, it's more than that. You're seeing the big picture now. Understanding that this isn't about individual battles, it's about the war. She was right. Sullivan had always been a warrior, focused on the immediate fight. Now he grasped the larger game, how Russia used criminal proxies to achieve strategic goals while maintaining deniability, how they exploited America's openness and interagency rivalries. The transformation touched his team as well. Reyes developed sources throughout the intelligence community. Mitchell became an expert on Russian military doctrine. Even young Kim matured from an eager operator into a seasoned professional. Agent Chen officially joined Eagle's Watch, bringing her border expertise and network of trustworthy contacts. Together, they mapped the corruption, identifying patterns that had been invisible to individual agencies. 1M. After the initial battle, Sullivan stood before a secure video conference connecting the White House Situation Room, Pentagon, and intelligence community leadership. Based on our operations and intelligence analysis, he began, we've identified the strategic framework of the Russian operation, designated Project Shadow. The objective is destabilization through criminal proxies, creating chaos that weakens American society without direct military confrontation. He displayed a complex diagram showing connections between Russian intelligence, cartel leadership, corrupt officials, and planned operations. We've disrupted their immediate plans, but the infrastructure remains. They'll try again, adapting their tactics. The president's voice came through the secure link. What do you recommend, Sergeant? Sir, we go on the offensive. Take the fight to them. Disrupt their networks before they can reconstitute. And most importantly, expose their operations publicly. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. There was murmuring among the officials, but the president cut through. Do it. Whatever resources you need. As the conference ended, Sullivan felt the weight of his new responsibilities. He was no longer just a soldier following orders, he was a leader shaping strategy, protecting not just borders but the entire homeland. That evening, as the desert cooled, Sullivan found Chen on the observation deck, studying the horizon. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. "Just thinking about Tommy. My partner. He saw something like this coming, warned that the cartels were getting too sophisticated, too well equipped. I didn't believe him. He'd be proud of what you're doing now. Maybe. Sometimes I wonder if we're making a real difference, or just playing whack-a-mole." Sullivan considered this. A month ago, I might have agreed. But now, we're not just reacting anymore. We're hunting. Predicting. Getting ahead of them. Chen smiled. You have changed. The others see it too. You're not just Condor 6 anymore, you're something more. As if to emphasize the point, Sullivan's secure phone buzzed. Another operation, another threat to neutralize. But now he approached it differently, not as an isolated tactical action but as part of a larger campaign. The transformation was complete. From border guardian to shadow warrior, from tactical leader to strategic commander. Jake Sullivan had evolved to meet the evolving threat. And somewhere in Moscow, in Beijing, in a dozen hostile capitals, America's enemies were learning a harsh lesson. The United States might be slow to recognize new forms of warfare, but once awakened, its response was devastating. Under the stars, Sullivan gathered his expanded team for a briefing. 50 operators now, supported by analysts, technicians, and specialists. Eagle's Watch had become Eagle's Strike, proactive, lethal, and relentless. Tonight, we hit 3 targets simultaneously, Sullivan announced. Phoenix, Dallas, and Denver. We're taking down their entire southwestern network. As his team prepared, Sullivan reflected on the journey from that first border interception to this moment. The mission had transformed, and so had he. But the core remained unchanged, defending America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The desert night beckoned, full of shadows and threats. But now, the hunters had become the hunted. And Jake Sullivan was just getting started. 6 months later, the landscape of American security had fundamentally changed. Eagle's Strike had dismantled 17 Russian proxy networks, arrested over 200 corrupt officials, and prevented countless attacks on American soil. The cartels, deprived of their state sponsorship, retreated to traditional smuggling operations, their dreams of becoming geopolitical weapons shattered. Sullivan stood in the new Eagle's Strike headquarters, a state-of-the-art facility hidden in the Arizona mountains. Wall-mounted screens displayed real-time intelligence from across the globe. His team, now numbering in the hundreds, operated with surgical precision from South America to Eastern Europe, wherever the shadow war demanded. Latest from Moscow, Reyes reported. Colonel Volkov's been recalled. Officially retired, but our sources say he's facing internal investigation. Sullivan smiled grimly. The Russian operation had backfired spectacularly, exposing their intelligence services to unprecedented scrutiny. Several high-ranking SVR officials had been purged, their American networks compromised beyond repair. But victory hadn't come without cost. 3 operators lost in raids, dozens wounded. The Shadow War demanded sacrifices, even as it remained invisible to most Americans. A knock interrupted Sullivan's thoughts. Agent Chen entered, now wearing the insignia of a federal task force commander. "The president's on secure line. Says it's important." Sullivan took the call in his private office. "Mr. President. Jake, I wanted you to be among the first to know. Congress just passed the Border Security Reform Act. Complete overhaul of our counterinfiltration capabilities. Your operation provided the blueprint. Just doing our job, sir. No, you did much more. You showed us the future of warfare, and how to win it." After the call, Sullivan walked outside. The Arizona sunset painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, an American flag flew proudly above the base. His thoughts drifted to his cousin Michael, to Agent Chen's partner Tommy, to all who'd fallen defending this nation. Their sacrifices hadn't been in vain. The cartel's defeat was undeniable. Though some questioned the extent of Sullivan's actions, most celebrated the powerful message sent: America does not bow to intimidation. Sullivan, humble yet firm, quietly stepped back from the limelight, continuing duties without fanfare, steadfast in moral clarity. Their story stands as a testament to an enduring American truth, that genuine strength lies not in aggression but in preparedness, resolve, and the unwavering commitment to justice and liberty for all. What do you think about this incredible stand? Do you believe strength alone guarantees justice, or does real power lie in partnership, strategy, and bravery? Share your perspective in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping real-life stories of courage in the face of overwhelming odds.